I'm the youngest of three. That usually means the cute one, the baby, the one everyone pretends to adore at family gatherings. But in our house, it meant silence, learned early, and practiced often. I wasn't the one people looked to for decisions or even attention. I was the background noise in a family that only noticed me when I was too quiet to ignore. It was one of those warm savannah afternoons when the light makes the dust in the air look like gold. I was sitting in the den, organizing the stack of legal papers that had piled up after Mom passed. Her handwriting still lingered in the margins of old bills and letters. It made me pause more than I should have. I remember something my grandma used to say, whispered like a warning. Sometimes your silence gives others permission to erase you. I used to laugh at it, thought it was one of her southern melodramaticisms, but that afternoon, I felt the weight of it settle on my chest. Because silence, mine, was about to cost me more than I ever imagined. Tucked in the pile was an envelope that had already been opened. Addressed to my sister, handwritten, no return address. I wasn't snooping. It had been sitting with the unpaid power bills and bank statements. I pulled it out without thinking, flipped it open, and froze. It was a printed cruise itinerary. Two names stared back at me, hers and his, my fiancé. I blinked hard, like the names would change. Maybe it was a group trip, something church-related, or a charity event she forgot to mention. But the longer I stared, the less innocent it became. One stateroom, shared. A departure date exactly 1 week from now. Port, Miami. My pulse didn't race. It slowed. Everything in me went still, like my body knew what my mind refused to accept. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a mix-up. It was a plan. And it didn't include me. I leaned back, the paper still in my hand, and just sat there. Long enough to hear the house creak, long enough to wonder how many signs I'd ignored. And just like that, memories came knocking. He used to get texts at odd hours, smiled at them, sometimes even stepped outside to answer. When I asked, he said it was family stuff. And her? She once bailed on a girls' night we planned for weeks, said she wasn't feeling well. That same night, she posted a photo in a cocktail dress at some rooftop bar with the caption, "Just what I needed." I remember seeing it and telling myself not to overthink it. I didn't want to be that woman, the jealous type, the one who's always watching, always doubting. That's not how I was raised. Southern girls learn early how to keep peace in the house, even if it costs them their own. Smile. Stay quiet. Don't stir the pot. But something in me had been stirring for a while now. I set the paper down and walked into the kitchen, the sound of my own footsteps suddenly louder than usual. I opened the fridge, stared at nothing, closed it again. I was stalling. I walked back to the envelope, picked it up again, checked the dates, checked the names, still the same, and then I noticed the room number, Suite 417, the premium kind, with a balcony. I thought of confronting them. Her first? Him? Both together? But what would that even look like? Screaming in the living room. Tears on the front porch. No, that wasn't me. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. The kind you feel when you're about to do something uncharacteristically bold. I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to see them. Really see them. As they were, without their lies, without their excuses. I pulled out my laptop, opened a browser, and booked a ticket for the same cruise. Different cabin. Different deck. Under my maiden name. No one would know. Not yet. I packed slowly that night, careful not to disturb the routine. I washed the dinner dishes, took out the trash, even texted him a good night like always. He replied with a heart emoji. I looked at it for a long time before locking my phone. I didn't write a note. I didn't tell anyone. If they noticed I was gone, they'd figure it out eventually. But this wasn't about making noise. This was about watching. Because sometimes the best way to reveal a lie is to act like you still believe in the truth. Miami smelled like sunscreen and concrete. I arrived 2 days before the cruise, telling myself I needed time to settle in. But really, I just needed to breathe. I needed space to fall apart in private before I had to hold myself together in public. That city, all noise and neon, pulsed with life. Tourists laughed, traffic buzzed, palm trees swayed like they hadn't seen anything worth worrying about in years. And yet, I couldn't feel a damn thing. I checked into a small hotel near the port, nothing fancy, just clean sheets and thick curtains. I dropped my bags, stood in front of the mirror, and stared at the face looking back at me. The same one he kissed goodnight, the same one she called baby girl in her texts. I didn't call anyone, didn't text. They didn't deserve a warning shot. Morning of the cruise, I dressed with purpose. Big sunglasses, wide sun hat, loose linen dress. I wanted to blend in, but mostly I wanted to disappear. My ticket was printed under my maiden name. The moment I stepped out of the hotel and walked toward the port, the humidity wrapped around me like a hand on my throat. The ship looked like something out of a commercial. Grand, glistening, fake. As I boarded, a woman in a crisp white uniform handed me a flute of champagne. I didn't take it. I didn't want celebration. I wanted the truth. The carpet was soft. Too soft. The kind that makes you walk quieter, more carefully. Polished brass railings, citrus-scented air. Couples laughing. Children pulling rolling suitcases. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't here to relax. Sometimes clarity comes not from answers, but from observing without interruption. My therapist had said that months ago. I thought it sounded cliché at the time, but now it clung to me like armor. I made my way up to one of the quieter decks, just to breathe, and that's when I saw her. Evadne, my sister. She walked up the gangway with the ease of someone who had done this before. Sunglasses perched on her head, tote bag slung over her shoulder, smiling, at ease, no guilt, no hesitation, but she wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, tall, with a navy polo and that casual confidence that comes from knowing you're welcome. I froze. It wasn't him, not my fiancé. My stomach twisted. Had I been wrong? I snapped a photo, hands steady, heart not. I followed them at a distance, careful not to get too close. They didn't notice me. Of course they didn't. I was invisible in this family when I was loud. Now that I was silent, I might as well have been a ghost. I didn't approach. I watched. Later, after lunch service had cleared out and most passengers were unpacking, I found a quiet lounge with big windows. I sat with a magazine I had no intention of reading, hiding my face while I let my mind spin. That's when she sat down across from me, uninvited, but not unwelcome. "Beautiful ship, huh?" she said. Woman in her 50s, short gray hair, sunglasses tucked into her neckline, kind eyes, confident tone. "I'm Meredith, traveling solo?" I nodded. "Yeah, something like that." She smiled. "I noticed you boarding earlier, same energy I had my first time. Eyes sharp, not here for the party." I smirked. "You could say that." She leaned in just a little. "Saw that couple earlier, the sister and her boyfriend. They've been around since yesterday." I stiffened. "Since yesterday?" "Oh yeah," she said casually. "Checked in early, looked real cozy. She kept calling him babe. Room 417 if I'm not mistaken. Fancy suite." The number hit me like a slap. I swallowed hard and forced a small smile. "They seem close?" She nodded. "You'd think they were married." That was all I needed. I thanked her, excused myself, and walked fast but steady. No emotion, no tremble. I just needed a place to fall apart again. Somewhere no one would find me. My stateroom was on deck 9, away from them. When I walked in, I didn't turn on the light. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. There weren't any screams or shattered glass. Just silence. Heavy, unbearable silence. I heard voices in the hallway. One of the crew members, young guy, Caribbean accent, was chatting with another staffer. "Suite 417 wanted that romantic dinner thing again," he said. "Same setup as last night." I shut the door, locked it. I cried then, quietly, like a faucet turned just enough to drip. I didn't want the noise. I just wanted the ache to mean something. I pulled out my journal from my bag, the same one I hadn't touched in months. The pen hovered, then landed. If they wanted this to be a vacation, they shouldn't have brought a ghost on board. I closed it, set it down, and I promised myself I'd let them show me who they truly were. No interruptions, no forgiveness. I found myself in the ship's cafe mid-morning, steaming coffee in hand, watching them through reflective glass. Evadne and Zayden sat across from each other, shoulders touching, a private joke shared in soft laughter. Their ease, so clean, so practiced, stung like acid. I traced their body language. She leaned in, he whispered something, she tilted her head and smiled. I wondered when those moments began. When he started kissing her instead of me. When that smile became hers. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it slips in, dressed as laughter. I watched them and felt the slow collapse of my assumptions. They weren't pretending. They were performing. And I had been complicit, ignorant, silent. A ghost in my own narrative. I walked down the gallery hallway, hugging the wall. That laughter, Evadne's laughter, echoed. A particular joke followed it, a jab about winning someone's heart by being patient. That phrase hit me like a shard. Zayden used to say it, to me, late nights in his car, when I worried he wasn't all in. He said it when he told me not to rush things, that love can't be forced. That exact joke, I stood rooted. The laugh cracked something open. Flashback came in a rush. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. He told me that line after I cried about something distant, something I didn't name. I brushed it off, said he was being poetic. But now I remember how she texted me the next morning, saying she was in town for work, but wore lipstick and heels that night. I didn't connect. I dismissed. I swallowed doubts so often I convinced myself they weren't worth voice. Back in my cabin later, I pulled out that old notebook I always carry, the one where I wrote quotes, reminders, scraps of memory. I flipped pages, eyes scanning entries, until I found one. December 2019. He left early, said migraine, surprised when she showed up next day. A note I thought meaningless at the time. Now it felt like evidence. The pieces snapped. Their story was built on omissions and edits. I traced a timeline, matching oddities I once excused away. When dusk fell, I went to the observation deck. Zayden was there, alone, leaning over the railing, phone in hand. I hovered in shadow. He looked up. I froze. Can I walk up? Challenge him? I thought about it, but instinct told me to wait. I watched him text. A photo image flickered across the screen. It looked like me, smiling, standing somewhere. I couldn't make out the caption, but it was mine. My photo. He mumbled a name I recognized. It was me, not Evadne. I closed my eyes. Hurt, rage, clarity. Later that evening, someone slipped an envelope under my cabin door. Hands trembling, I opened it to reveal a photo. Evadne, Zayden, and Meredith in an earlier hotel lobby, pre-boarding. Behind them, a sign. Honeymoon package, Lennox Zayden. My name, their stolen story. I whispered into the dark. You didn't just steal him. You stole my story. The walls felt too close. My heart, too loud. I put the photo in my pocket. The hunt wasn't about exposing them anymore. It was about reclaiming my truth. I walked through the ship's main lobby like I belonged there. Families posed for photos near fake palm trees. Couples giggled over frozen drinks. Crew members moved in polite rhythm, placing towels, adjusting signs, all of it meant to keep the illusion alive. Vacation, ease, sunshine. But I wasn't on vacation. I wasn't here to smile. I kept moving, eyes forward, chin up, like I was just another woman on a cruise trying to forget something back home. But I wasn't trying to forget anything. I was trying to remember everything. As I passed the check-in kiosk again, I caught something. One of the crew greeting Evadne and Zayden by name. Mrs. Voss, Mr. Moore, welcome back. Back? They had been here before, or at least long enough to earn recognition. Another crew member echoed it. We're honored to have you aboard again, ma'am. I kept walking, but inside, something twisted. Then the voice came over the intercom. Welcome aboard all guests, especially Miss Voss and her companion. We hope your romantic voyage is everything you dreamed of. It hit me low in the gut, like a soft blow meant to linger. My name had never echoed like that, not even when I was the one who booked this trip, not even when I thought it was for us. Later, at the guest services desk, I asked a harmless question about the dining schedule. The woman behind the counter smiled, tapped her screen, and said, "Ah, yes, Ms. Drexler. And guest. Anything else we can help you with?" I paused. Guest. She meant me. Meanwhile, the digital welcome board rotated slowly above the lounge entrance. I read it twice before believing it. "Welcome, Mrs. Voss, Mr. Moore. Ocean View honeymoon package." I stepped back. Like I'd walked into a wall. Someone beside me muttered, "Saw them at check-in. Cutest couple I've seen in a while." My jaw clenched. I kept my lips shut, but inside, I cracked. I walked away without saying a word, fists tight behind my back. All of them, the staff, the guests, were part of this play, and I was the only one without a script. In one of the ship's quieter lounges, tucked behind a row of bookshelves and fake fireplace decor, Meredith found me again. She wasn't smiling this time. She sat beside me, placed a small envelope between us like it was something fragile, and whispered, "You deserve the truth." I waited until she left before opening it. Inside, a note scribbled in block letters, "Evidence is power," and a USB thumb drive, plain, silver, unmarked. I rolled it between my fingers. There was weight to it. Not physical. Something deeper. I didn't know yet what it held. Photos? Video? Messages? But Meredith's face told me it wasn't nothing, and she'd risked something to get it to me. I slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. This wouldn't be used out of desperation. I wasn't here to scream. I was here to document. The hallway leading to the guest staterooms was quiet, lit only by small sconces and the occasional flicker from outside light through portholes. I walked slowly, listening. One room I passed. Laughter. Evadne's, clear as ever, high-pitched, carefree. She wasn't pretending anymore. Behind another door, I heard lower tones. Male voices. Zayden's, maybe. The words weren't clear, but the familiarity was. I heard Meredith's voice in my head again. "Be careful. They'll notice." I turned the corner too quickly and nearly ran into a crew member. He paused, looked at me, then handed me a note. "Miss Voss requests your presence in the photo gallery." He said it like it was nothing, but that message felt like a mine buried under calm. I took the long way there. By the time I arrived, the hallway outside the ship's gallery was empty. Inside, framed photos of passengers lined the walls, smiling faces, cocktail nights, staged sunsets. Then I saw it. Centered on the feature wall, beneath a soft spotlight, a framed print of Evadne and Zayden. Her head rested on his shoulder, his hand on her waist. Behind them, ocean sky, deck railing, and just barely visible on the edge of the frame, me, cropped out, mid-stride, unnamed, unnoticed. The caption under it, in scripted font, "Our forever escape." But I knew that background, that railing, that sky. It wasn't from this cruise. It was from one 2 years ago. One I took, one they weren't on. They'd taken a moment from my memory and turned it into their love story. I stood there a long while. I touched the glass and said soft but certain, "You can't hide me anymore." The envelope sat on my dressing table for hours. I stared at it, not sure if I had the strength to open it or the guts to attend what was clearly a trap. But when evening came and the halls dimmed with candlelight, I dressed in black, a simple gown, understated, no sparkle to distract. I told myself, sometimes showing up is the first move. I arrived at the dining hall's entrance, heart thundering. The maitre d' nodded at me, showed me inside. I walked through under chandeliers, past polished silverware, well-dressed guests murmuring. My insides clenched when I saw them. Evadne and Zayden, side by side, flawless, and seated at the same long table. Across from me, no escape. I sat. I recognized almost everyone there as cruising guests. None of them had any idea what was about to unfold. Evadne greeted me with slow, practiced politeness. The dinner began with polite chatter. Wine poured, starters passed, but she started steering the talk. "You always had such a soft heart, Lennox," she offered, voice calm. "Some people never grow out of that." A jab wrapped in a compliment. I held my fork tight. Zayden sat mute, eyes flicking between us. The guests responded with idle smiles, unaware of the tension threading the air. I bit my lip, remembering her saying something like that years ago, about generosity, guilt, a hidden theft. It knocked me deeper under the water. Then she stood, lifted her glass, toasted. Guests joined. I kept my glass at my side. She said, "Here's to the unexpected joys of life, even when they come from unexpected places." It felt like poison in silk. My jaw clenched. I forced my voice steady. And here's to finally seeing people for who they are when the mask slips. Immediate hush. Murmurs. Zayden shifted. The room felt small. The facade cracked. Later, near the restrooms, I walked quickly. Meredith appeared beside me in the corridor's dim light. "They planned this," she whispered. "You weren't randomly seated there." She handed me another note. Names, times, staff codes. Proof someone behind the scenes was coordinating. My chest twisted. I folded it into my clutch, head spinning with possibilities. Someone had made me part of their theater. Back in my cabin, I shed my dress slowly, stared into the mirror. My eyes looked fierce. I removed lipstick, wiped it away like erasing a mask. In the quiet, my mom's words echoed. "Sometimes dignity is the loudest scream." I opened my journal. I wrote lines from that dinner, not in fear, but in clarity. Under the heading, "The line I won't let them cross again," I outlined what I would never tolerate. I glanced at the note again. I set it to burn in a candle flame. The paper curled and blackened. Smoke drifted. I watched it, controlled. And in that hush, I made a promise to myself. Tomorrow, I take back the narrative. I slipped away to the business center late that evening. The corridors quiet except for muffled voices and the hum of air systems. My pulse felt loud in my ears. In a secluded corner by a glass door, I sat with trembling hands, the USB warm between my fingers. My heart raced. I closed my eyes and breathed in. Silence had always cost me loss. Tonight, it would be my weapon. I plugged the drive into a computer and opened the files. Email threads, annotated contracts, scanned PDFs with redactions. My name was everywhere. Then I saw it. A contract drafted years ago, naming me as co-owner of core assets in the family holdings. I leaned forward, eyes scanning. But then I saw a revised version, dated just last week. My name was removed. Metadata showed the editing user, the ship's admin ID. The timing, 2 days before departure. They planned this. It wasn't an oversight, it was erasure. My breath caught. I copied the original contract, duplicated versions, export logs. Every file. I locked them down, saved them secretly. My fingers shook. Betrayal cut deep, but I was ready. I would not leave this cruise broken. Then announcements began echoing through hallways. A staff member urged guests toward the ship's auditorium for a media event. Screens flickered. I walked in slower than I wanted, the corridor stretching longer with every step. Inside, guests faced a large projection screen. A PR video started. It twisted me into instability, accusing me of false claims against Evadne. Words from earlier conversations were spliced, decontextualized, turned into evidence of a supposed vendetta. The audience gasped. Some looked at me with pity, others with doubt. I sat rigid, fingers gripping the edge of the table. A voice within me roared, "Don't crumble." I shut it down. I would respond, but not yet. When I stepped out into the hallway for air, I almost bumped into Zayden. He looked startled, mouth parted. I said quietly, "Don't speak if you're just going to lie." He reddened, tried to stammer, then turned and walked away. My heart split between heartbreak and resignation. I wasn't shocked. I was awake. Back in my room later, I shut and locked the door, lit only by a small lamp. I sat on the edge of the bed, contract printouts across my lap. I drafted in my mind the words I would say when the time was right, and I wrote, "I won't ask for your recognition, I will earn it." I thought of a line by Audre Lorde. When I dare to be powerful, it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. I lit a candle. The papers trembled in the flame. I watched the edges curl, but I didn't burn them, yet. I held them like truth in my hand, not ashes. I slept with them pressed against me, ready for what came next. I felt the pull in the air before I even walked into the formal lounge. The room seemed too warm, the lights too bright. Staff exchanged glances I couldn't ignore. Guests whispered among themselves. The music played softly, but tension vibrated beneath it. I steadied my breath. Ever since the USB and the night's revelations, everything felt like a minefield. But tonight, I would step closer to detonation. I rehearsed words in my mind, not desperation, but clarity. I would not shrink so they could grow. Dinner began under crystal chandeliers and simmering candles. The chatter shifted when the room stilled. Evadne's daughter, Evadne Jr., looked at me across the table and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Why is Aunt Lennox here? Didn't she used to live somewhere else?" The cut hung in the air. Glasses paused mid-raise, cutlery drooped, all faces turned. Evadne's eyes flickered. My chest stung. I didn't reply. I let silence do the damage. She broke it. "I'm so sorry if I startled anyone," she said, voice pitched soft. "Aunt Lennox sometimes slips in unannounced." Sympathy soaked her words. Innocence painted thin on guilt. Guests murmured. Zayden cleared his throat. I watched the tiny flickers, her lips quiver, then strengthen. I saw the script beneath the performance. I slipped away into a dim corridor connected to the lounge. Evadne followed. Footsteps, soft but sure. We stood facing each other, the walls close, voices low. She hissed, "Don't think you can break me with a child's words." My eyes cold, I said, "I don't have to break you. The truth will." Her face twitched. Anger, fear, calculation. I turned, walked out, let her simmer behind me. Back in my cabin, I replayed the night quietly in my head. I pulled out the contract, the documents, the entries. The daughter's question aligned perfectly with the files I held. I wrote in my journal, "No more performances. I'm writing my lines now." I tucked the USB into my gown's inner pocket, not hidden, positioned. Tonight, I would not wait in the shadows. I'd step into the light, on my terms. I paused before the mirror, hands trembling just a bit, and asked myself, was I ready for a reckoning? The cabin was dim, the soft hum of the ship's engines was my only company. I tucked the USB and the original will documents into my clutch, tried not to let the edges bend. The air in the hallway felt loaded, staff hovering, guests whispering, the gown I wore whispering across carpet. As I stepped into the corridor, muffled orchestral music drifted from the ballroom doors. I inhaled. Tonight would decide who claimed truth, and who would be buried by lies. The grand ballroom glowed under crystal chandeliers. Guests arrived in black tie elegance, laughter spilling over champagne flutes. Evadne and Zayden swept in together, greeted with applause. Then I walked in, shoulders back, silent but unshakable. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. The screens flickered on, and a recorded montage began. Me portrayed as unstable, accusatory, unhinged. I let the silence carry me while my pulse went cold. The voiceover shifted. The original will was revealed, naming me. All of us froze. The manipulated narrative collapsed in real time. A staff member stepped forward with a sealed envelope. The original will, validated, untouched. I stood and said, calm but cutting, "This is the one you tried to bury." I showed signatures, timestamps, metadata, proof. Gasps echoed. Evadne's face drained of color. Zayden opened his mouth, closed it. Nearby, someone whispered, "She's not crying. That's strength." It battered me and steadied me all at once. Then the screens shifted again. Side-by-side clips, the falsified version and the real one. The edited narrative unraveled. Evadne's script cracked. The real footage, her words in context, the edit stripped away, played back. The room went hushed. Some guests whispered, some stared, some shifted closer to me. She tried to step forward, to salvage control, but others hushed her. The room sided with truth. The mask cracked. I turned and faced my family. You failed to see me, I said softly. But you can't ignore me now. I felt the shift. The crowd's loyalty bent. Guests glanced at me not with pity, but recognition. Evadne stood still, flanked by silence. I passed her slowly, no triumph, no flourish, just reclaiming space. Power had changed. The night's favor had turned, and I walked into it, unbowed. The ship eased into the dock just as the first hints of sunlight stretched across the water. I stood on the top deck, hands on the railing, watching the harbor come into focus. Seagulls dipped and called overhead, their wings flashing white against the orange sky. I could smell the salt, the city, the promise of stillness after the storm. A few passengers walked past me, giving nods of respect. Soft smiles, one even said, "You handled yourself." I nodded back. I didn't need applause. What I needed was air, quiet air. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a strip of the edited video, just a piece I'd kept, a reminder of the fiction they tried to make fact. I held it a moment, then let it fall. The wind took it before it hit the water. And I whispered, "Some endings aren't loud. They're a quiet reclaiming of breath." I didn't go far. Checked into a small inn just off the edge of town. The kind of place with floral curtains and a front desk bell. An old woman behind the counter handed me my key like she'd been waiting for me all morning. Said nothing, just smiled and nodded toward the stairs. Later, I walked through streets I hadn't seen in years. Same bakery, same barber shop, same crack in the sidewalk where I once tripped chasing a bus. At the edge of a park, I saw it. A mural, faded, but intact. Me and my sister painted in bright, clumsy colors. I must have been 8. I touched the brick wall and smiled. Not everything needed to be rewritten. At my lawyer's office, the assistant handed me an envelope. He said to give this to you today, specifically. Inside, a letter, folded once. My grandfather's handwriting. It read, "If betrayal ever finds you by blood, know that I left a door only truth could unlock." Attached was the legal clause. Proof of betrayal by a direct family member would activate a trust he kept secret, untouched by anyone else, including Evadne. She'd tried to challenge it, apparently. Quietly. And failed. Also listed, the deed to my grandmother's house. Untouched. Untouched by the legal fire Evadne set behind my back. I didn't cry. I just sat back in that stiff office chair, folded the papers, and whispered to myself, this wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering who I was. The next afternoon, I stood in my grandmother's kitchen, dust thick on the windowsills. I didn't clean it. I just stood there, palms flat on the counter, breathing in the quiet. This was the room she'd told me stories in, where she taught me not just recipes, but how to listen between the lines. A knock came. Neighbors, 3 of them, holding baked goods and folded arms and decades of familiarity. They stayed for coffee. We talked like no time had passed. They didn't ask about Evadne. They didn't need to. As the sun set, I sat on the porch, notebook in hand. I wrote a letter. To myself. A version of me that had been buried under other people's stories for too long. I wrote slowly, letting each line land. At the end, I signed, "You didn't just survive, you returned." In the days that followed, I met with a nonprofit downtown, talked about starting something in my grandmother's name, a place for women betrayed by blood, to find shelter, to be heard, to rebuild without shame. One morning, walking past the courthouse, I saw her, Evadne, coming down the steps, alone, no entourage, no flash, just her, clutching a folder to her chest. She saw me, I saw her. We didn't speak, and we didn't need to. No hate, no triumph, just finality. Sometimes moving on means letting the silence speak louder than justice.